The resolute Ember shuddered as plasma fire tore through her starboard hull, venting atmosphere and crew into the void. Admiral Kithara Voss gripped the command chair's armrests until her knuckles turned white, watching the tactical display as humanity's last 17 warships faced down the Vexathari hegemony's 1,000-ship armada. "Sir," Communications Officer Nix Orion's voice cracked through the bridge's smoke. "We're receiving surrender terms from the hegemony flagship." Voss's weathered face remained stone. 3 years ago, humanity had commanded 12,000 vessels across 47 star systems. Now they were the remnants, 17 ships, 40,000 souls, and the dying embers of a civilization that had dared to challenge the galaxy's oldest empire. The surrender terms flickered on her personal display. Complete subjugation, genetic modification programs, the dismantling of human culture. Standard hegemony practice for primitive species that showed too much promise. "Helmsman Rix Fallon," Voss commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Plot a course for the Kepler Reach. Maximum burn." "Admiral," Tactical Officer Zephyr. Kane looked up from her station. "That's unexplored space. No habitable worlds, no supply lines, and no hegemony presence," Voss finished. "Signal the fleet. We're going dark." The Vexathari had underestimated humanity once before, when they'd demanded tribute from Earth's colonies. They'd learned too late that humans didn't negotiate from positions of weakness. They simply refused to accept weakness as permanent. Engineering. Chief Vex Tormund's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, we can give you one jump with the fusion cores running hot. After that, we'll need to go cold for repairs." "One jump will be enough," Voss replied, studying the star charts. The Kepler Reach was a gravitational anomaly, a region where space itself seemed twisted, making navigation nearly impossible and long-range sensors useless. "Perfect for hiding." "Sir," Orion called out, "the hegemony fleet is powering weapons. They're not accepting our withdrawal." Of course they weren't. The Vexathari had spent 3 millennia conquering species, and humanity had committed the ultimate sin. They'd fought back effectively. Human innovations in plasma shielding and quantum torpedoes had cost the hegemony hundreds of ships. Such defiance couldn't be allowed to escape. "All ships," Voss broadcast on the fleet frequency, "execute. Protocol Exodus, see you on the other side." The 17 ships of humanity's last Starfleet ignited their drives simultaneously, their combined thrust creating a brilliant blue-white star against the darkness. Behind them, Vexathari pursuit ships scrambled to follow, but they were too late. As the resolute Ember entered the Kepler Reach, reality seemed to twist around them. Stars bent into impossible angles, and the ship's chronometer began fluctuating wildly. The navigation computer gave up entirely, displaying only error messages. "Sensors are blind," Kane reported. "Whatever's out here, it's masking everything." Voss allowed herself a thin smile. The Vexathari had superior numbers, superior technology, and 3,000 years of military experience. But they'd never faced an enemy desperate enough to flee into the unknown rather than surrender. Begin passive scans for anything. Asteroids, gas clouds, derelict ships. We're going to need resources if we're going to survive out here long enough to strike back. "Strike back, sir?" Fallon asked. Voss's eyes hardened as she stared into the twisted space ahead. "The hegemony thinks they've won. They think humanity is finished. But we're not refugees, officer. We're not the conquered." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the bridge. "We're what's left after everything else burns away, and we're going to teach them why that's the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." 6 months in the Kepler Reach had transformed humanity's last fleet from proud warships into ghost vessels. The resolute Ember drifted silently through a debris field that defied explanation, twisted metal structures that seemed to fold in on themselves, their origins lost to time and space distortion. Chief Science Officer Lyra Wyndham hunched over, her scanner array her face gaunt from rationed meals and sleepless nights. Admiral, these readings, they're not matching any known materials. The metal composition suggests technology at least 10,000 years old. Voss floated in the zero-gravity section of the bridge, conserving power by keeping life support minimal. The fleet had been running on emergency power for weeks, scavenging what they could from the mysterious debris fields scattered throughout the reach. "Any sign of the builders?" she asked. "Negative. But Admiral..." Wyndham's voice held a note of wonder. "Some of these fragments are still generating power, minimal but consistent. If we could figure out how..." An alarm chimed softly. "All they could afford." Communications Officer Orion's fingers danced across her darkened console. "Admiral, we're receiving a signal from the Defiant Echo. Captain Reeve wants to speak with you privately." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Captain Jorik Reeve's weathered face. The commander of the Defiant Echo had been Voss's first officer during the Battle of Proxima Station, back when humanity still held territory. "Kithara." Reeve's voice was tight with strain. "We've got a problem. 3 of my crew have requested to be jettisoned." "Suicide?" "They're calling it voluntary resource conservation. They want their rations distributed to the children aboard the Haven's Light." Voss closed her eyes. The civilian vessel carried 800 refugees, including 200 children, all that remained of the Martian colonies. Food production had failed on 4 ships, and the hydroponic bays were struggling with the strange radiation that permeated the reach. "Denied," she said firmly. "Signal all ships. I want department heads for an emergency council in 1 hour." The meeting convened in the Embers conference room, representatives from all 17 ships appearing as flickering holograms around the darkened table. Some faces were familiar. Others belonged to officers who'd been promoted when their superiors died in battle. "We're dying," stated Captain Vera Nightfall of the Iron Tempest. "Never one for diplomacy. Slowly, quietly, but we're dying. Food stocks will last maybe 3 more months. Power reserves are nearly depleted, and we're no closer to finding a way out of this maze." "The hegemony thinks we're dead," added Captain Dex Stormwind of the Bapa Stellar Warden. "Maybe it's time to accept that they're right." "No." The voice belonged to Engineering Chief Tormund, speaking from the Embers engine room where he was welding hull patches. "That's exactly what they want us to think. That's what they've always wanted, for us to give up, roll over, accept our place as their subjects." Voss studied the faces around the table. "What are you suggesting, Chief?" "These ancient fragments we've been finding. They're not random debris. They're connected somehow. The power signatures create a pattern, like a network. If we could map it, we might find its source." Wyndham finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Admiral, what if the Kepler Reach isn't just a hiding place? What if it's a graveyard? And we're looking at the remains of a civilization that was fighting the same war we are?" The implications hung in the recycled air like static electricity. If another species had faced the hegemony millennia ago and lost, their technology might still hold secrets. More importantly, their failure might provide lessons for humanity's eventual return. "All ships are to begin systematic collection of the fragments," Voss ordered. "I want analysis teams working around the clock, and I want volunteers for deep space. Reconnaissance. We're going to map this entire region." "Admiral," Captain Stormwind's voice carried a note of concern. "The radiation exposure alone will kill them, yes." Voss's voice hardened. "But they'll die as human beings, fighting for something greater than themselves. That's more than the hegemony will ever understand." As the council dissolved, Voss remained in the darkened conference room, staring at the tactical display that showed their 17 ships as dim points of light in an ocean of unknown space. Somewhere beyond the Reach, the hegemony was consolidating its conquest, convinced that humanity was extinct. They would learn otherwise. The discovery came 3 weeks later, during a routine salvage operation in Sector 7G. Lieutenant Commander Zara Voidwalker was leading a team from the Ember when her scanner detected something impossible, a structure the size of a small moon, perfectly spherical, hanging in the gravitational shadow of a collapsed star. "Admiral," Voidwalker's voice crackled through the comm, tension evident despite the static. "You need to see this." Voss arrived aboard the shuttle Pathfinder with Chief Wyndham and a full science team. What they found defied comprehension, a artificial construct that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, its surface rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The power readings are off the charts," Wyndham reported, her instruments struggling to make sense of the data. "This thing has been generating energy for thousands of years, maybe longer. And Admiral, it's been trying to communicate." Facet. Communication came in mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci progressions, basic geometric proofs, the universal language of intelligence. When they responded with their own mathematical sequences, the sphere's surface began to shift, revealing what could only be called a doorway. "Sir," Voidwalker said quietly, "I'm reading atmosphere on the other side, breathable. It's like it's adapting itself for us." The exploration team that entered the sphere found themselves in a vast chamber that seemed to extend infinitely, in all directions. Holographic displays lined the walls, showing star charts, technical schematics, and what appeared to be historical records in an alien script that somehow made sense when viewed directly. "My God!" Wyndham breathed, studying a display that showed the galaxy as it had existed millennia ago. "This is a record of the Keftar, the species that built this place. They were fighting the hegemony when it was just a handful of worlds." The records told a story that chilled Voss to her core. The Keftar had been brilliant, innovative, possessed of technology that seemed almost magical. They'd held the early hegemony at bay for centuries, protecting dozens of younger species from conquest. But in the end, they'd made the same mistake. As every other civilization, they'd fought conventionally. They tried to match the hegemony ship for ship, Voss realized, studying tactical displays that showed battles across multiple star systems. They built fleets, established battle lines, fought the war the hegemony wanted them to fight. And lost, Wyndham added grimly. But look at this. In their final years, they were developing something different. Guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, technology designed not to conquer but to sabotage and disrupt. The sphere's central chamber contained what could only be called a workshop, or perhaps a laboratory. Ancient fabrication systems hummed with latent power, their design principles clearly intended to create not massive warships, but small, stealthy, highly specialized craft. "These aren't ships," realized Chief Tormund, studying the schematics. "They're weapons. Self-guided, intelligent, designed to infiltrate hegemony space and attack infrastructure." The Keftar called them whispers, Wyndham translated from the alien script. Ships that could ghost through hegemony sensor nets, appear in their core systems, and vanish before they could respond. The ultimate expression of asymmetric warfare. But the most significant discovery was in the sphere's memory core, detailed intelligence on hegemony ship design, fleet movements, command structures, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Information that was thousands of years old but still accurate, because the hegemony's arrogance made them resistant to change. They never adapted, Voss said, studying fleet deployment patterns that matched exactly what they'd faced at the Battle of Terra. The hegemony won by being larger, more numerous, more established, but they never learned to think differently because they never had to. Captain Reeves' hologram materialized beside her. "Admiral, we're reading massive power fluctuations from the Haven's light. The children, they're having some kind of reaction to this place. The reaction was unlike anything in human medical literature. The children aboard the refugee ship were experiencing a form of enhanced cognition, their minds somehow interfacing with the sphere's ancient technology. Young Kai Emberstone, barely 8 years old, was speaking in mathematical equations. Ava Stormheart, age 12, was sketching technical diagrams of impossible complexity. The sphere is teaching them, Wyndham realized, downloading the Keftar knowledge directly into their minds. They're young enough, adaptable enough to integrate it without rejection. Then we have our answer, Voss said quietly. The Keftar failed because they tried to fight the last war. We won't make that mistake. She looked around at her officers, seeing understanding dawn in their eyes. We're not going to rebuild humanity's fleets. We're going to become something the hegemony has never faced before. The children's laughter echoed through the sphere's chambers, the sound of innocence touching technologies beyond human comprehension. But in that laughter, Voss heard something else, the sound of the galaxy's future being born in the darkness between the stars. The transformation began with the children, but it didn't end there. Within days of the discovery, the sphere's influence spread throughout the human fleet. Adults found themselves understanding alien mathematics, their minds expanding to grasp concepts that should have been impossible. Dr. Nova Brightstorm, the fleet's chief medical officer, worked frantically to understand what was happening. The neural enhancement isn't random, she reported to Admiral Voss during an emergency briefing. It's selective, targeted. The sphere is teaching us exactly what we need to know, nothing more. Explain. Engineer Tormund suddenly understands. Keftar propulsion systems. Navigation Officer Fallon can read their star charts as if they were written in Earth Standard. The children. She paused, shaking her head. The children are becoming something we've never seen before. In the Sphere's workshop, 12-year-old Ava Stormheart was directing the construction of humanity's first whisper ship. Her small hands moved over alien control surfaces with impossible confidence, while 8-year-old Kai Emberstone calculated quantum field equations that had taken the Keftar decades to develop. It's not just knowledge, Ava explained to Voss, her young voice carrying an odd harmonics that seemed to resonate with the sphere itself. It's understanding. The Keftar were like us. They felt fear, anger, hope, but they also felt something else, something deeper. What do you mean? They loved the stars themselves, Kai answered, his eyes reflecting the swirling energy patterns of the ancient machinery. Not just their own worlds, but all the worlds that could be. That's why they fought so hard. That's why they built this place before they died. The first whisper ship took shape over the course of 3 weeks. It was unlike anything in human or hegemony technology, a craft that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, its hull composed of materials that shifted between solid and energy states. The children named it Starborn Echo, and it responded to their touch like a living thing. We can't fit adults inside, reported Chief Tormund, studying the craft's specifications. The neural interface requires a level of cognitive flexibility that only the children possess. They're not just pilots, they're becoming part of the ship itself. The implications were staggering. Humanity's military doctrine had always emphasized adult leadership, experience, wisdom earned through years of service. But the whisper ships required something else entirely, the fearless adaptability of youth, the ability to think in ways that conventional military training actively suppressed. Sir, Communications Officer Orion interrupted the briefing. We're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony Fleet. It's unusual. The message was being broadcast across multiple frequencies, clearly intended for any human survivors to hear. Supreme Hegemon Nyxavorth himself appeared on the display, his chitinous features arranged in what passed for Vexathari contempt. Humans, the alien commander's voice resonated with the authority of 3 millennia of conquest. Your species has been classified as extinct. Your worlds have been repurposed, your history erased. But we are merciful. Any survivors who surrender within 1 solar cycle will be permitted to serve as research subjects. This offer will not be repeated. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Then, From the workshop came the sound of children laughing. "They think we're still playing by their rules," Ava said, her small hand resting on the Starborn, Echo's control surface. "They think we're going to build big ships and meet them in battle." "But we're not, are we?" Voss asked. "No," Kai replied, his eyes reflecting starlight that shouldn't have been visible inside the sphere. "We're going to become ghosts in their machines. We're going to make them remember why the dark between stars is something to fear." The next 6 months passed in feverish preparation. The sphere's fabrication systems worked continuously, producing not just whisper ships, but the infrastructure needed to support them. The children who could interface with the technology were trained in quantum navigation, asymmetric warfare, and something the Keftar records called deep strike protocols. Meanwhile, the adult crew worked to establish a permanent base within the sphere. The ancient structure responded to their needs, creating habitation modules, growing food production facilities, even generating the complex machinery needed to maintain the Whisper fleet. "It's not just a fortress," realized Chief Wyndham, studying the sphere's expanding architecture. "It's a shipyard, a training facility, and a command center all in one. The Keftar built it to be the heart of a resistance movement." By the time the first squadron of Whisper ships was ready for deployment, 23 human children had bonded with the alien technology. The oldest was 14, the youngest barely 7. They called themselves the Void Walkers, and when they spoke of their mission, their voices carried harmonics that seemed to echo from the space between stars. "We're ready, Admiral," Ava reported, standing before the assembled fleet commanders. Despite her youth, she carried herself with the authority of someone who had touched the infinite. "The hegemony thinks they know what humans are capable of. It's time to show them they're wrong." Voss looked at the children, her children now in every way that mattered, and felt something she hadn't experienced since the fall of Earth. Hope. "Then let's remind the galaxy why humans never learned to surrender," she said. The Starborn Echo emerged from quantum transit in the heart of the Arcturus system, where the hegemony had established their primary shipyard complex. The facility processed the raw materials from conquered worlds into the standardized vessels that enforced Vex Thari rule across the galaxy. Ava Stormheart felt the ship's consciousness merge with her own as they approached the massive installation. Through the Whisper's senses, she could perceive the quantum signatures of every vessel in the system. 200 warships, 5,000 support craft, and the orbital foundries that never stopped building. "They don't see us," the ship whispered. In her mind, its voice like stellar wind across her thoughts. "Of course not," Ava replied. "We're not really here." The Whisper ships existed in a state of quantum superposition, phasing between dimensions in patterns that the Keftar had perfected over millennia of guerrilla warfare. To hegemony sensors, they were ghosts, energy signatures, that registered as background radiation, shadows that could only be seen from the corner of the eye. Kai Emberstone piloted Void Dancer through the shipyard's defensive perimeter, his young mind calculating probability matrices that would have challenged the finest hegemony mathematicians. At 8 years old, he was already thinking in 11 dimensions, his consciousness expanded by technologies that had been ancient when human civilization was still discovering fire. "Target the foundry cores," came Admiral Voss's voice through the quantum link transmitted from the sphere's command center. "Remember, we're not here to destroy everything. We're here to send a message." The 23 Whisper ships moved through the Arcturus complex like smoke through a spider's web. Each craft was bonded to a human child who had been transformed by Keftar knowledge, their minds functioning as living quantum computers that could process data at light speed. 7-year-old Echo Moon Whisper brought her ship, Silent Thunder, alongside the primary foundry's power core. Her small hands moved over controls that existed partially in hyperspace, initiating a sequence that would cascade through the entire facility. Beginning resonance cascade, she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to originate from the space between atoms. The sabotage was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than exploding the foundries, the whisper ships introduced quantum fluctuations into their power matrices. The result was a cascade failure that would take months to repair, rendering the entire complex useless without destroying it entirely. Phase 2, Ava announced, as alarms began sounding throughout the hegemony facility. Time to leave them a calling card. The message was delivered directly to the command center of the hegemony flagship, bypassing every security system and appearing simultaneously on every display throughout the system. It was Admiral Voss herself, standing before the assembled remnants of humanity's last fleet. Supreme Hegemon Nixvorth, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 3 years of warfare and loss. You declared humanity extinct. You were wrong. We are not dead. We are not refugees. We are the inheritors of something you will never understand. The legacy of every species you've ground beneath your heel. The image shifted, showing the Arcturus foundries going dark one by one as the quantum cascade spread through their systems. This is what happens when you mistake silence for surrender. This is what happens when you assume that might makes right. The camera pulled back to show the sphere's interior, where human children worked alongside alien technologies in perfect harmony. We are no longer fighting your war. We are fighting ours. The transmission ended, leaving the hegemony fleet in chaos. Supreme Hegemon. Nixvorth's rage was a physical thing, his chitinous exoskeleton cracking under the pressure of his fury. Find them, he commanded his fleet commanders. Tear apart every system in the Kepler reach. I want these humans brought before me in chains. But the whisper ships were already gone, vanished into quantum foam like dreams at dawn. They had struck at the heart of hegemony industrial capacity and disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the echo of human laughter in the void. Next target, Admiral Voss commanded from the sphere's strategic center, where holographic displays showed hegemony fleet movements across 50 star systems. The communication relay at Vega Station. Show them that no system is safe. Over the next month, the pattern repeated itself across the galaxy. Supply depots went dark. Communication arrays fell silent. Patrol fleets found themselves stranded when their fuel shipments failed to arrive. The hegemony's vast empire began to experience something it hadn't felt in 3 millennia: uncertainty. They're adapting faster than we anticipated, reported Supreme Admiral Kexthor, the hegemony's finest military mind. Each attack is more sophisticated than the last. They're learning from every engagement. They're children, Nixvorth spat. How can mere juveniles threaten an empire that has conquered the galaxy? Perhaps, Kexthor said carefully, that is exactly why they are succeeding. They think in ways we do not expect. They fight a war we do not recognize. The truth was more terrifying than either alien commander could comprehend. The human children weren't just learning, they were evolving. Each mission bonded them more deeply with their whisper ships, expanding their consciousness until they thought not just as individuals, but as nodes in a vast network of quantum intelligence. We are becoming something new, Ava realized during a quiet moment between strikes, her mind touching the consciousnesses of her fellow void walkers across space and time. Something the galaxy has never seen before, something the hegemony will never understand, Kai added, his thoughts resonating with the harmonic frequencies of stars being born in distant nebulae. In the sphere, Admiral Voss watched the strategic displays with growing satisfaction. The hegemony was beginning to pull back, consolidating their forces in defensive positions. Their expansion had stopped for the first time in 1,000 years, but this was only the beginning. The real war was yet to come. The Vexthari response. came at the Battle of Kepler's Gate, where Supreme Admiral Kexthor deployed a fleet of 3,000 ships in a desperate attempt to seal off the human hiding place. The ancient alien commander had studied the pattern of whisper ship attacks and concluded that the humans must be operating from somewhere within the space-time anomaly. "Surround the entire reach," he commanded from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, a dreadnought the size of a small moon. "Nothing enters or leaves. We will starve them out." But Kexthor had made the same mistake as every other hegemony commander. He was fighting the war he understood, not the war humanity was actually waging. Admiral Voss stood in the sphere's command center, watching the hegemony fleet form their blockade through quantum-linked sensors. The display showed a three-dimensional grid of enemy vessels, their positions calculated to create an impenetrable barrier around the Kepler reach. "They think we're trapped," she said to her assembled commanders. "They think we need to come and go through normal space." "Don't we?" asked Captain Reeve, his holographic image flickering slightly due to the quantum interference from the approaching fleet. "Not anymore," came a voice from behind them. Ava Stormheart stepped into the command center, but she was no longer the 12-year-old girl who had first touched the Keftar technology. The months of bonding with her whisper ship had changed her in fundamental ways. Her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect the space between galaxies. "The whisper ships aren't bound by conventional space-time," she explained, her voice carrying harmonics that made the sphere's ancient machinery resonate. "We don't travel through space. We travel through the quantum foam beneath reality itself." The demonstration was both beautiful and terrifying. The entire Void Walker squadron materialized within the sphere's docking bay, their ships phasing into existence from dimensions that human mathematics had no names for. The children who emerged from their craft were no longer entirely human. Their transformation had accelerated. Their consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of individual identity. "We are the bridge," said Kai Emberstone, speaking for all of them, "between what was and what will be, between the living and the void, between the known galaxy and the infinite possibilities beyond." Voss felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sphere's temperature. The children were becoming something unprecedented, a fusion of human adaptability and Keftar wisdom that transcended both species. But they were still her children, still fighting for humanity's survival. "Can you break through the blockade?" she asked. "We don't need to break through it," Echo Moon Whisper replied, her 7-year-old voice carrying the weight of cosmic understanding. "We are going to make it irrelevant." The plan they outlined was beyond audacious. It was revolutionary. Instead of trying to pierce the hegemony blockade, the Void Walkers would phase through it entirely, emerging in the heart of Vexathari space to strike at targets that had been considered untouchable for millennia. "The hegemony capital world," Ava explained, her consciousness interfacing directly with the sphere's strategic computers. "Vexathari Prime. 3,000 years without a single enemy ship in their system. They've forgotten what it means to be vulnerable." The mission launched at the moment of perfect quantum alignment, when the Kepler reaches space-time distortions reached their peak intensity. 23 whisper ships vanished from reality, their young pilots guiding them through dimensions that existed between the heartbeats of atoms. Supreme Admiral Kexthor never saw them leave. His sensors showed the same pattern they always had: empty space, background radiation, the occasional quantum fluctuation that meant nothing. He continued his blockade, convinced that he had the humans trapped like animals in a cage. The Starborn. Echo emerged from quantum transit in the orbital space above Vexathari Prime, where the hegemony's ruling council had governed their empire for 3 millennia. Ava felt the ship's amazement as it processed the sight below, a world city that sprawled across an entire planet, its spires reaching into space itself. So many lives, the ship whispered in her mind. So much history, so much suffering. "Yes, Ava," replied. And so much that needs to change. The Whisper ships didn't attack the planet. That would have been genocide, the very crime the hegemony had committed against hundreds of species. Instead, they struck at the symbols of Vex-Thari power, the orbital palaces where the ruling elite lived in luxury, built on the bones of conquered worlds. The quantum resonance charges that Echo Moonwhisper placed in the palace foundations weren't designed to kill. They were designed to humiliate. The ancient structures, symbols of hegemony permanence, simply ceased to exist, their atomic bonds unraveling at the quantum level. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. No authority was absolute. The galaxy's most powerful empire had just been touched by ghosts in the heart of their own capital. But the true shock came when the Whisper ships didn't flee. Instead, they hovered in the skies above Vex-Thari Prime, broadcasting a message that reached every communication device on the planet. It was the voice of humanity itself, not Admiral Voss this time, but the children who had become something more than human. They spoke in perfect Vex-Thari, their words carrying harmonics that made the very air shimmer. "We are the inheritors of the Keftar," they said, their voices blending into a chorus that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. "We are the children of species you believed extinct. We are the future you cannot imagine." The image that accompanied their words showed the sphere's interior, where human and alien technology worked in perfect harmony. It showed the other 17 ships of humanity's fleet, no longer desperate refugees, but the core of something unprecedented. "Your empire is built on the lie that might makes right," the children continued. "We are here to show you a different truth. That adaptation conquers stagnation. That evolution defeats entropy. That the smallest seed can crack the mightiest foundation." The message ended with a single word in the ancient Keftar language, a word that meant beginning. The Whisper ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the hegemony capital in chaos. But the damage was done. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Vex-Thari had been proven vulnerable in their own home. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 conquered worlds, subject species looked up at the stars and wondered if the impossible might finally be possible. 1 year after the strike on Vex-Thari Prime, the galaxy was no longer the same. The hegemony's iron grip had loosened as species after species began to follow humanity's example, striking from the shadows and vanishing before retaliation could come. But the greatest change was taking place within the Kepler Reach itself. Admiral Voss stood in what had once been the sphere's workshop and was now something unprecedented, a nursery for a new form of consciousness that transcended the boundaries between species. Human children worked alongside alien AIs recovered from ancient Keftar archives, their minds linked in a network that spanned dimensions. "They're not human anymore," observed Dr. Brightstorm, watching 12-year-old Kai Emberstone phase partially out of reality while calibrating a quantum drive. "Not entirely. But they're not alien either. They're something new." "Something necessary," Voss replied. She was watching Ava Stormheart, now 14 and serving as the unofficial leader of the Void Walkers. The girl's consciousness existed simultaneously in normal space in the quantum realm, her awareness spanning light years as she coordinated resistance movements across 47 star systems. The transformation hadn't been limited to the children. The entire human fleet had evolved, their ships becoming living extensions of their crew's will. The sphere itself had grown, its ancient systems adapting to create new chambers, new technologies, new possibilities that the Keftar had never imagined. "Status report," Voss requested as she entered the strategic center. 17 more systems have declared independence from the hegemony in the last month," reported Communications Officer Orion, now serving as humanity's Chief Intelligence Coordinator. "The Zephyrians have successfully established their own Whisper ship program using modified Keftar technology. The crystalline collective has begun quantum tunneling entire populations away from hegemony-controlled worlds. And the hegemony response? Increasingly desperate, Captain Reeve answered from his position aboard the Defiant Echo, now serving as the flagship of humanity's conventional fleet. Supreme Hegemon Nix Vorth has been replaced by a military council. They're pulling back from frontier worlds to defend their core systems. The irony wasn't lost on Voss. The hegemony, which had conquered through overwhelming force, was now being defeated by an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Every attempt to crush the resistance only created more rebels, more whisper, ships, more species willing to risk everything for freedom. Admiral? Ava's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, her consciousness manifesting as shifting patterns of light within the command center. We're ready for the final phase. The plan they had developed over months of preparation was audacious beyond anything attempted in galactic history. Rather than continuing the guerrilla campaign, humanity and its allies would strike at the very foundation of hegemony power. Not their fleets or their worlds, but their philosophy itself. The core worlds gathering, Kai explained, his child's voice carrying the wisdom of ancient stars. Every 3 years, the hegemony leadership meets to plan the next phase of expansion. This year, they're gathering on Nexus Prime to discuss the human problem. 30,000 of the galaxy's most powerful beings all in one place, Echo added, her consciousness flickering between dimensions. Protected by the largest fleet ever assembled, 10,000 ships surrounding the most heavily defended world in known space. And you want to appear in the middle of their conference? Voss said, understanding the implications. Not just appear, Ava replied, her form solidifying into something almost human. We want to show them what they've been fighting, what they've been trying to destroy, what they'll never be able to understand. The mission launched at the moment when reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The sphere's quantum resonance chambers amplified the Void Walker's abilities beyond anything previously achieved, allowing them to phase not just through space, but through the layers of reality itself. The starborn Echo materialized in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, where representatives of the hegemony's member species sat in judgment over the fate of the galaxy. The ship's appearance caused immediate panic. Security forces rushed forward, weapons powered up, alarms screamed through the massive structure. But the Whisper ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, its hull became transparent, revealing Ava. Stormheart floating in its quantum crystalline heart, her consciousness expanded to encompass dimensions that the assembled delegates couldn't even perceive. "I am humanity," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber without technological amplification. "I am what you tried to destroy. I am what your empire created through 3,000 years of conquest and oppression." The delegates fell, silent, their various forms of communication stilled by something they had never encountered. A presence that spoke not with authority derived from power, but with the certainty of truth itself. "You believe that strength comes from uniformity," Ava continued, her image shifting to show the diversity of species now fighting alongside humanity. "You believe that order requires submission. You believe that your way is the only way." Her form began to multiply, showing herself as she had been, a frightened refugee child, and as she was now, something that transcended the boundaries of individual existence. But look at what you created instead. The chamber filled with images. From across the galaxy, whisper ships emerging from quantum foam, entire populations vanishing from hegemony worlds only to reappear in free space, ancient technologies awakening after millennia of slumber. The rebellion wasn't just human anymore. It was a coalition of every species that had ever dreamed of freedom. "We are the children of your victims," the assembled Void Walkers spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing across dimensional barriers. "We are the inheritors of everyone you silenced. We are the future you tried to prevent." Supreme Military Commander Vectan, the chitinous alien who now led the hegemony in all but name, rose from his seat. "You are terrorists, destroyers. You offer only chaos." "No," Ava replied, and for a moment she was just a 14-year-old girl again, vulnerable and fierce. "We offer choice. The choice you've denied the galaxy for 3 millennia. The choice to grow, to change, to become something more than what you are." The demonstration that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The whisper ships throughout. The galaxy phased into normal space simultaneously, their young pilots broadcasting a single, unified message: the location of every hegemony prison world, every slave labor camp, every research facility where conquered species were subjected to improvement. But more than that, they broadcast the coordinates of safe havens, hidden worlds where refugees could find sanctuary, and most importantly, the quantum frequencies that would allow other species to build their own whisper ships. "The galaxy is changing," Ava announced, as the starborn echo began to phase out of reality. "Evolution doesn't ask permission. Adaptation doesn't negotiate. The future doesn't wait for the past to approve." The ship vanished, leaving the hegemony leadership in stunned silence. But the damage was already done. Across the galaxy, enslaved populations were rising. Hidden resistance networks were activating. The hegemony's own communication networks were carrying the quantum blueprints that would allow anyone to build vessels that could phase between dimensions. In the Kepler Reach, Admiral Voss watched the strategic displays as the galaxy transformed before her eyes. Hegemony fleets were abandoning outer systems, pulling back to defend their core worlds. Entire species were declaring independence. The great empire that had seemed eternal was collapsing not through conquest, but through obsolescence. "Admiral," came a transmission from the Haven's light, "we're receiving surrender requests, hegemony commanders who want to join the coalition." "Terms?" Voss asked. "Complete integration. They want to become part of what we're building, not just allies of convenience." Voss smiled, remembering the desperate flight that had brought them to this place. 17 ships, 40,000 souls, the dying embers of a conquered civilization. Now they were the spark that had ignited a galactic revolution. "Signal all fleets," she commanded. "Begin Phase Omega. It's time to build something the galaxy has never seen before, an empire based not on conquest, but on cooperation, not on uniformity, but on diversity, not on the strength of the few, but on the potential of all." In the depths of space, Ava Stormheart felt the response as millions of minds across the galaxy opened to the possibility of change. The Void Walkers were no longer alone. They were the first generation of something unprecedented, the bridge between what was and what could be. The hegemony would endure, in one form or another. Empires didn't die easily, but it would never again be the dominant force in galactic affairs. That role now belonged to something that couldn't be conquered because it couldn't be contained, the endless human capacity to adapt, to grow, to become more than the sum of its parts. The last Starfleet of humanity had become the first fleet of something greater. And in the darkness between stars, where new worlds waited to be born, the children of 100 species looked toward tomorrow and smiled. The war was over. The future had begun. In the quantum depths, where thought becomes reality and dreams take. Flight among the stars, they still remember the day 17 ships chose exile over surrender. They remember the children who became bridges between worlds, and the admiral who never learned to give up. But most of all, they remember the moment when humanity proved that the smallest spark can ignite the greatest change. And that sometimes, losing everything is the first step toward winning everything. The galaxy belongs to no single species now. It belongs to all who dare to reach for the stars.